Welcome back, this is Goldberg. Today I want to quickly thank a member of the Clown World community for pointing me in the direction of this book, Why Liberalism Failed by Patrick Deneen. This is a piece that really amalgamates and confirms much of what we have been discussing for years, those of us who were skeptical of liberal politics, whether they be conservative or progressive. Because if you say things like that, you're accused of being a racist, of having something wrong with you. No, we just need reform. So for the conservatives, it's if we only followed the Constitution, if we only had term limits and a balanced booty amendment and less government, everything would work out fine. But of course, if the Constitution as was written worked properly, you wouldn't have all these issues. You wouldn't have out-of-control spending. You wouldn't have these endless wars. It is because of liberalism, not against it, that we are experiencing this problem. Or the progressives, if we just retrofitted buildings and had Medicare for all and free college. No, again, it is liberalism that creates the system of winners and losers. Liberalism which atomizes individuals, makes them feel like they have no connection, and they should actually be ashamed of maintaining any traditions, beliefs, or tribal loyalties. So this is a good book. If you know someone this Christmas who likes politics, current events, I'd encourage you to pick this up. It's not a long read, but it's got tons of great information, and it will certainly change their perspective. So I'm just going to cover some various things that stood out, and again, I would encourage you to pick it up. So here we are. Liberalism and liberal democracy are good if they confirm liberal ideas. So when Trump got elected, that was not acceptable. That's why we have to go and try to eliminate the Electoral College or tell the electors vote against Trump. We have to try to undermine the election because how dare there be an outcome that we don't support. These deplorables, they're not really part of the mainstream. It's not something that we can let stand. And similarly, you'll see where Obama carries on Bush's policy, which he described as air raiding villages and killing civilians. That's okay, though, because he's a liberal. He's part of the global liberal order. Whereas if Saddam Hussein gasses Kurds, no, you can't do that. You're a dictator. So again, if you have the auspices of the liberal system, you're excused for things that other people would say are crimes because of who you are and what you associate with. And that's the kind of narcissistic, self-confirming morality of liberalism, whether it's right or left. Let's see here. And he makes an analysis of the Federalist Papers, basically claims a lot of the Founding Fathers believed the system would become centralized and may have even supported that, versus the idea that it was supposed to remain small, we need to reduce government. He says no. In fact, liberalism advances in terms of individual rights right alongside statism. Why? Because, yeah, they talk about natural law, but in reality, the government's the one in the social contract that is giving you those freedoms. It's supposedly protecting them in the Constitution, but the government also has to find excuses to take more power. So it'll say, well, you need these freedoms to be a consumer, but we have to take away some privacy rights in order for you to remain free so that the terrorists can't get you or whatever. So we have to take away certain liberties in order for you to actually be free. And if you follow, yeah, it's kind of true. Even the so-called conservative politicians, they never make serious attempts at shrinking the size of the state. More and more power is going to the executive, and the checks and balances system is not functioning, like I was talking about with the Constitution. Why is it that half the country thinks that these impeachment charges are a joke and half of them think that Trump should go to jail? There is not really belief in institutions. Why is the debt out of control? Because Congress is not actually doing its job. If liberalism worked, then we would have the best of the best, cream of the crop statesmen who would come to power and put aside rhetoric and ideology. But of course, no, they're saying let's use the state to enrich ourselves and to maintain our political power. There's also the element of liberalism making people obsess over self-interest. So instead of, just a subsistence-based existence, no, you can't be average. You have to go to the best school. You have to make a big salary. You're always examining your own life, comparing it to others. But the past is not acceptable. So the progressives don't like the past for the most part because more racism, too many white people. The conservatives like the past in these general themes like the Constitution, fighting Nazis. But they don't like to acknowledge that most of those institutions were built by people who were from Europe or European descent. So a good example of how conservatives don't really care about conserving anything, they're okay with the environment being gradually destroyed. So whether it's we have to adopt nuclear power, not so much whether nuclear power is safe or not, which it's relatively safe, but it is a question of, well, we need more nuclear power so we can keep developing, so we can keep growing, so we can keep letting people in the country so our GDP goes up. As long as we're growing, that means we're beating the terrorists. Remember Bush, go out and shop at malls. That's how we'll beat the terrorists. In other words, we have to continuously expand. Even if that is, in the case of these developments, even green developments, sustainable building, are, in North Carolina, eradicating the outer and inner banks gradually. Other parts like Glacier National Park, I think, some of the effects of the climate are having an impact and are reducing it, and all over the world. But we kind of ignore that because, no, at least we're growing. The effects don't matter right now. The planet that the children inherit, the future of the country, national identity, the community you live in, those don't really matter as long as there's economic growth. This person wants to start a job. Great, let's let them in. That kind of start a job. I should start a business. That's okay. That's what we care about. So, all about self-interest. Kids become an imposition. It's too expensive. Liberal culture basically cuckolds traditional cultures. It says liberalism is going to give you more enrichment and diversity, multiculturalism, but instead it's essentially destroys these old school cultures, corrupts them into, you have to go and purchase culture. So you go to the diverse restaurant, but you can't maintain your tribe, you can't maintain your traditions, because that goes against the whole advancing one world culture of essentially just consumers, deracinated, no actual nothing that they keep to in terms of what they believe. It's just as long as you got a credit card and you have money to spend, that's what we care about. Fascism, they say, is for the lonely. People go to totalitarian or strongman leaders because they want to feel they belong, because they don't feel as though they're in a community with liberalism. Yep. He puts this quote, they want to advance global narcissism whilst perpetuating the belief in its own benevolence. End of citizenship. Citizenship is not about your fellow man, your own people. No, it's about private interests expanding the economy. Subsistence versus the greed of more of a developed world. And finally, he talks about John Stuart Mill and the harm principle, or the non-aggression principle, which a lot of libertarians don't understand. He says John Stuart Mill was not really talking about restraining government so much as restraining certain aspects of public opinion that he didn't like. So, great book, a great summary of the problems we're facing right now. It will certainly change the perspective of a person, whether they're right-wing or left-wing, because they have to start considering, what if the entire system is the problem that needs to be adjusted?